What is going on, everybody? Been a couple of weeks since we had our last bunch of leaks for Resident Evil news. This time it's actually coming in the form of the next RE9 news. We've done a couple of videos on this channel talking about the leaks that have happened over the past couple of months and stuff regarding the future of Resident Evil, and I quite like doing them. I quite like going over what they're talking about here and giving my overall opinion on whether that actually sounds pretty cool or whether it even sounds remotely realistic. Like always, they all come with a pinch of salt. I think it's pretty good to speculate about the future of RE, especially with how much I loved RE4 Remake, and it feels really good for me to get back into the habit of talking about the series going forward now. Right off the bat, the first thing on the list here actually says that RE9 stars Leon and Jill, not just Leon. So this will be the first time, if it's true, that Jill will ever be teaming up with Leon. Now, I've not seen the CG film, so I have absolutely no idea what happens with him. I'm only kind of going by the games here. I think it's about time we had Jill back in the mainline franchise. Obviously, she made an appearance back in the RE3 remake, but canonically, the last time she was in one of the main numbered games was as far back as Resident Evil 5, and that happened way back on the Xbox 360 and PS3 days. I, for one, would be happy to see her back. More than welcome. I also want to see Rebecca back, but I'm not talking about Rebecca here, but Jill, definitely want to see her back in the mainline games. It also says here that Jill is apparently to Leon what Sheva is to Chris in RE5. So that can go down both ways. I mean, does that actually mean that the game is going to be a cooperative game? I personally hope it isn't. I know there's a lot of people that love RE5 for the cooperative play that happened in the game, and that was the light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of people who played RE5. Some people are like, oh well, the game's no overall that good, but the co-op is what saved it. But I think the co-op is also one of the things that maybe was the first signs of the series cracking when it came to RE5 and 6. I think when they started focusing on not a single player campaign, that's kind of when it started to crack a little for the likes of me, I'd like to know what other people think about that, but I don't really like the idea of Jill just hovering around on screen beside Leon, if that is what they're alluding to here. It's saying here that the game is not fully open world, it just has open world elements like Village and RE4 Remake. So I think this is a wee bit disappointing in some areas. I mean, I for one have kind of speculated that the games are going to be going open world for quite some time. It's been a long time since it's even really been experimented on properly, and I think the last game that I think of when I think of open world survival horror is Evil Within 2. There's a segment in that game that is completely open world and fantastic, and handles side quests very, very well for a survival horror game, but then it went back to its linear style for after that part of the game. But that part was fantastic, and I still think it's the best part of Evil Within 2. Like we were saying, Village and RE4 Remake gave off the impression that the series is going open world one day, and I personally thought it would be RE9 that would do it. But according to this leak, it's saying here that they're just going to go down the same open world elements like Village and Remake. That's a wee bit disappointing, especially because one of the leaks has been saying that this game's been in development for 9 years. You would genuinely think that this is the game that they're trying to figure out to do it with. I'd like to hear what people feel about this, because I know there's a couple of people that actually think that open world is not the correct way to go for Resident Evil. I think it's inevitable that it is going to go that way, at least for a couple of games, and I was kind of hoping it would be 9. Either or, maybe they're just not fully confident on it actually working, but I mean, I still think they are going to do it, because when you look at a game like Monster Hunter Wilds coming out, they're experimenting with that game going fully open world as well. I still think it's Resident Evil's time, and I still think 9's going to be the one that does it. Saying here that the game was initially designed as being a co-op game, but after the positive reception to RE7 and 8 being single player, Capcom may have cut the co-op aspect. Hard to believe that a game that's been in development for 9 odd years would just turn around and scrap one of the ideas that they were starting with for years, and because of 7 and 8 they would just turn around and cut it. I don't know though. Yeah, I do think that by them saying RE7 and Village though, would they not just say the positive reception as well to RE2 and 4 Remake as well as maybe added to that change. I don't know. It seems a wee bit like a bit of hearsay there. They may have cut the co-op aspect. I mean, like I just said, I hope it is single player. I think that is what Resident Evil is best at, even though it might sting to a lot of like hardcore RE5 fans, but I do think you got to go with the vast majority, and I think the vast majority of people want single player survival horror from Resident Evil, or action horror like going forward. I think they will experiment with co-op again, but it'll be a game like RE0 Remake that we were just talking about, and RE5, but I don't think it's going to be like RE9. And the next thing here it's talking about is, when considering cutting the co-op aspect, Capcom also considered cutting Jill as well, just to focus on Leon and the single player. However, after reducing Jill's role so much in RE5, they felt it was unfair to cut her again. Says he knows 100% that Jill is still in the game as a main character, he's just not sure where she stands from a gameplay perspective. Hard to comment on this one. I mean, the last thing we just read was saying that Capcom may have cut the co-op aspect, but now we're going on a whole thing about when considering cutting the co-op aspect, they're thinking about cutting Jill entirely. So I don't know, does he know if they're cutting Jill or not? It just seems a wee bit weird. I'm not entirely sure what to think about this one. Let's just say she was a co-op character and now she's not. How would they add her into the story? Well, they would just make scenarios. I personally think that's how they would go about it. Maybe they've decided to go about it like an A and B scenario. One side with Leon, one side with Jill. I would much prefer that, I think, but I do think that when it comes to RE2 Remake, what diminishes the story was actually the scenarios in RE2 Remake for me. So you're left with a non-canon way of looking at that game. There's no actual canon for like RE2 Remake because of the scenarios. I don't know if that was on purpose, more than likely, but like I really would like a nice, you know, all-in-one story. There's nothing that like interferes with it, but I don't know. Maybe they know a better way to go about the scenarios now. I know it would add a crap ton of replayability having a scenario as Leon and a scenario as Jill. It would be nice though if the scenarios were like completely different from each other and didn't like fight the same bosses and stuff. That's what I'm hoping with. The only way to respond to this one is like if they have cut co-op, maybe they've went down a scenario aspect for it. Let me know what you think about that. Seems the most logical explanation to me. Saying here that it's mentioned that if it is still cooperative play, he's no sure how Capcom is designing it. Says it could be like RE5 or RE6, or like RE0 where you freely switch between characters, or may just end up being two separate campaigns for each character. Okay, I guess it's just touching right there on the separate scenarios that we just talked about. That's what makes like the most logical explanation to me. Like I said, I really hope they're not doing it like RE5 and 6 with like Jill just hanging about in the background like cramping Leon's style, or vice versa. I just don't like it. I think it gets rid of a lot of tension having like an AI just chilling there on the screen with you. I don't like it. And I really hope it's not like RE0 either, because that was just not fleshed out at all. But I mean, if they're like thinking about redoing RE0, which we were just talking about, maybe they've figured out a good way to go about that. I still think scenarios though. Next thing it's saying here is he doesn't know who the game's supporting characters are, but he suspects that it's most likely Barry for Jill and Ada for Leon. So like, it seems a bit hearsay-ish, this bunch of stuff that we're reading here, and it's getting a wee bit more like that as we go on. There's nothing concrete here, nothing that anyone said, it's just saying he suspects that it's Barry for Jill and Ada for Leon, and I think anybody could probably take a wee guess that that's as good a guess as any that it would be Barry for Jill and Ada for Leon, right? I mean, I don't know how much we should really like look into this one. It just seems like a good guess to me. Says here that RE9 will not focus on Blue Umbrella, and not likely the BSAA cliffhanger from the end of Village either. If the BSAA cliffhanger is addressed, it will only be a small part of the game. I'll be honest with you right now, I can't remember the entire story of RE Village. Didn't really find it that interesting, to be brutally honest. Like I say, the newer one that I really like is RE4 Remake. That's got me back into enjoying the series more. Maybe I'll replay Village at some point, but I'm not a big fan of the FPS Resident Evil games, to be brutally honest, so I don't really know too much about the stories. Played them once and I was done. But the one thing I do remember about Village, and the best part of it, was the end, where you played as Chris, because I felt like that was some of the best respect that Chris was given in the franchise since, like, Code Veronica. Like, that was, like, the last game that was written by a lot of the older Resident Evil teams back then, and RE5 was what it was. You know, boulder punching Chris, and you know, ever since then he was a bit of a meme, but I genuinely feel like the Indie Village is where they paid him his first bit of respect in a long time. But I don't really know how to comment on this because I'm not entirely sure about Blue Umbrella. I know like Chris was working with Blue Umbrella, but I don't know the ins and outs of all that. Maybe you guys can clue me up on that. Speaking of FPS Resident Evil, it says here that the game will be in third person, but he suspects that first person will be added later to the game, similar to like Evil Within 2. So that second part there is a bit of a guess again, isn't it? I mean, it's a good guess. I mean, at the end of Village, I remember they actually added in the third person camera, like the over-the-shoulder camera to Village. I remember like seeing a lot of people playing it on Twitch. I never checked it out, but it wasn't implemented like it is in RE4 Remake, where it was designed with the over-shoulder camera in mind. It was still controlled like an FPS, but you just were over the shoulder. Does that make sense? That's how it works in Village. But it looks like here they want to go back to over the shoulder third person and maybe ditch the FPS as being the main aspect now. For me, I'm happy with that. Like I say, I don't really like the FPS Resident Evils all too much. It's cool that they were experimenting with new stuff to get people back into the franchise, start fresh. But, you know, I think like it could create another dilemma though. Kind of like where, you know, you got the fixed camera angle. OG players that still miss that camera angle, like myself. And then you've got like the over-the-shoulder camera where everyone's like, no, every game needs to be like this. And now you might have created another, oh god, what's happened to the FPS Resident Evils? Bring them back. You know, it might do something like that. You never know. But for me, I'd rather have over-the-shoulder than FPS personally. And the last thing on the list here for the RE9 leaks is that he thinks the enemies will indeed be zombies, but they'll be faster and likely more aggressive, since the slow, lumbering zombies wouldn't really be a threat to Jill or Leon anymore. I personally hope that is the case. I think one of the best things about RE4 Remake is how fast and random the enemies are and aggressive. It leads to a lot of hilarious moments and every single playthrough being different, as opposed to something like RE2 Remake where it's very much a one route suits all if you know exactly where you're going. So it can really be like the same playthrough every time for RE2 Remake, and you're just taking a really safe approach through the police station. So I prefer it. I prefer the more RE4 Remake approach, and it sounds to me like that's what they're going after by making the zombies evolve a little bit more and be more aggressive. And that's everything for the RE9 leaks, actually. There's a couple of little things tacked on the end here, which I think is interesting. It'd probably be okay to talk about. I'll pick a couple out of them. Most of them are not that interesting, but it says here that RE5 Remake was in pre-production, but was ultimately shelved, not cancelled until Capcom can figure out how to handle the racism controversy. Dude, I really don't have much to say on this other than, like, I think it's ridiculous that people even think there's any racism involved in RE5. It happened back in the day, and I thought it was ridiculous back then, and I think it's just as ridiculous today, and I really hope that's no getting in the way of RE5 Remake being a thing. There's one other thing here that's really interesting. It says that Capcom put out a call for RE6 Remake, but nobody had any interest in the project, so it was cancelled and will likely never happen. Because we've been speculating that RE6 will happen. They might as well just clean up loose ends, you know. Maybe it's been like shelved now, but I guarantee you they'll definitely do it. You know, like the more, it's just, you might as well just make it again and make it better, you know, like it's one of the only things that's left of RE's, you know, like some nasty stuff on the legacy is RE6. I know some people like it, sure, but they have a chance to make it even better, and I think they just will. They might as well. And that's everything here for these leaks. If I had to give like a personal opinion about this bunch of stuff that we've just read, the only thing that I genuinely think is true is probably that Jill's going to be in the game and Leon, because it just seems like there's a lot of guessing and a lot of the stuff we've read here. He's no sure on a lot of it. He's kind of just guessing, like with the Barry and the Ada stuff. Like what we've talked about before, it's very easy to make like an educated guess on Resident Evil leaks and kind of just tell people what they want to hear. Oh, we've not seen this character in a long time. Let's just say that this character is going to be in it more than likely. Saying that the game is going to be like third person versus first person is highly likely that that is happening anyway, just purely because of the positive reception of games like RE4 Remake lately. Saying that the game was maybe going to be co-op is a good guess as well, actually, just purely because of the fact that we know RE5's coming. There's a lot of speculation about, are they going to do co-op in that game, are they not going to do co-op? So it's pretty safe to just turn around and say that RE9 might have co-op, or it might be shelved. Doesn't matter. If either shows up, it's kind of like he was right about either. I don't know. There's a lot of hearsay in these rumours. Good to discuss though. I like talking about them. I'm a wee bit more disappointed about the fact that maybe the open world might not be happening, but I personally still think they are going to do open world for RE9. Let me know what you think about the latest bunch of leaks, and I'll catch you in the next one.